Welcome to Figure Eight, where we feature inspiring stories of women entrepreneurs who have grown their businesses to 7 and 8 figures revenue. If you're in the mix of growing a bigger business, these stories are for you. Join us as we explore where the tough spots are, how to overcome them, and how to prepare yourself for the next portion of the climb. I'm your host, Julie Ellis. I'm an author, entrepreneur, and a growth and leadership coach who co-founded, grew, and exited an 8-figure business. This led me to exploring why some women achieve great things. And that led to my book, Big Gorgeous Goals. Let's explore the systems, processes, and people that help us grow our businesses to new heights. If you're interested in growing your business, this podcast will help. Now, let's get going. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Figure Eight. Today, I am in conversation with Wendy Brookhouse, and Wendy is a financial advisor, an independent financial advisor, who went out on her own from the very beginning, and that made her path to entrepreneurship a little bit more difficult than it might have been if she had gone with a big firm. But because she was independent, she was always working for her clients. And I'm so interested to chat with her about that today because she has created a thriving and vibrant business. And she has also created a niche for herself as an advisor to women entrepreneurs in particular, and talking about why we should all be growing bigger businesses to get what we really want in life. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie.
Oh, it's so great to have you today. And I'm so curious about, the beginning of when you started your business and what that was like, and where you've gotten to.
Perfect. Well, I think when I first started, as you mentioned, I came in as an independent, which had its challenges and hurdles. But I've come to look at it as actually the thing that's made me stand out in the field a bit more, because all along there was no one telling me how it was done. So I got to use a lot of basic self-reference criteria about, well, here's what I'd want from an advisor. Here's the stuff where I would want some help. And, and how do I actually deliver on that in a way that clarifies and simplifies so that everybody can amplify, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So, again, hard at first, easier as you went along. And I still feel to some degree, even today, that I'm forging some new paths that people haven't gone on yet, or not many have, where I look at, does this make sense? Yeah, it doesn't make sense anymore to me. So I got to change that.
Ah, that's so interesting. Well, and it's probably given you like a framework to be more in touch with that and assessing it.
Yeah, well, and I think also having been a business owner, sold businesses myself, and things of that nature, I come into the relationship with entrepreneurs different, right? And I have been in many coaching programs, so I've learned from other entrepreneurs. I've learned from other great entrepreneurial coaches, and I bring all of that to the table. So they get the financial planning aspect, but they also get business acumen, and they also get this almost like a coaching mentality around money, business growth, etc. That is, I think, vastly different.
Hmm. Well, and that kind of aligns with, your sort of position that, your business is an asset. It
Yes.
is not a baby.
No.
And I think, it's very easy. We start businesses because we see a need in the world.
Mm.
I think inevitably that's the common answer I find from people. They see a need in the world. And so people are very passionate about meeting that need.
Absolutely. And I think I look at that kind of as a bit of our why, right? So that's our purpose, which really is one part of the whole puzzle of that piece, right? So when you think about, do you want to stay a solopreneur? Do you want to grow something? Obviously, if you can grow something, you can have more impact. You become that drop of water that then goes and out and out and out. You have to let go of some stuff to do that, though. You cannot be the center of everything. You cannot become the bottleneck. You have to really recognize, where are my unique abilities? How am I applying that? And then how do I build team to do
Hmm.
it?
Yeah, and I think it falls into those categories of things no one teaches you. And I did a whole series of blog posts on this, like decision
Mhm.
making, how you make decisions,
Yep.
especially as your business grows and it feels like, so many more people are depending on you for their paycheck. The weight of the decisions and making the wrong ones starts to just feel quite heavy. And so finding the frameworks and the methods to help you make good decisions is really important. But nobody ever walks into your office and sits down and says, "So, how are you making decisions these days? Is it working for you? Do you need some ideas about frameworks that could help you?" Like, there's no magic person that shows up to ask that.
Or even someone who goes, "You're making that decision. Are you making that from the right place?" Right? Because I find I check myself all the time in terms of, "Well, you've been a bit tired lately. Are you making this decision because you're tired? Or do you just need to go have a nap and then come back to this?"
Yeah. Or are you stuck in the sprint mentality? And so you're just like trying to rhyme through things. And that's not actually helping either because you're not taking into consideration all of the things you need to make a good, solid decision.
I love when people talk about the difference between a reaction and a response, right? And I think what you're alluding to is giving yourself space so that you know, running, and getting stuff done isn't helpful if you're not doing the right things.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times, the role that I can play, I think you play too, is we're actually helping people. Hey, let's get up to the 30,000-foot view and just make sure you're in the right forest. You know, then we can go back down to the ground and decide what you're doing in there. But, are you doing the right things? Yeah,
Yeah. And that's where someone really starts coming into their own as the CEO of their business.
absolutely. It's having that space, that freedom to think. Right. And I think that's vastly overrated. I think in our society, sometimes, if you're not frantically doing something, well, then you're lazy or you're not productive or what have you. But that time to read, to just sit and think, that's when the really good answers appear.
It's true. It's true. And I agree with you that I think we don't value it. And depending on your personality as an entrepreneur, it can be easy to minimize it. I know, I've got one of my co-founders who's a very good friend. She doesn't need to schedule thinking and reading, and it's an integral part of who she is. But
Ah,
for me, if it's, I needed to start to feel okay with putting it in my calendar and actually doing it.
good for you, and I feel like there's these little things going back to things people don't tell you. When you are busy and you have a lot on the go, there's the day to day, but then there's the projects, the projecty things that are going to get you further ahead and maybe, free you from stuff. And if you're not careful, those become side of the desk activities as opposed to focus. And I feel like um, it's so funny. I had this epiphany, and it's just so basic, so simple, Julie. Like it's almost ridiculous. It's like, if you want those projects to move forward, Wendy, you're going to have to put time in your calendar to do it.
And when the calendar opens up and says that's what you're doing, you also need to actually do that work.
Fair enough, Julie. There's two parts to that.
Yep.
But when I started doing that, I started getting further ahead because project work is different than day to day. It's a little bit more contemplative. It's a bit more building foundational pieces or infrastructure pieces that are going to really, help you amplify. Yeah.
No, I think that makes sense. Um, and just thinking about, so you provide a lot of counsel to your clients.
Mm,
And one of the things that I know you do is, you talk about with entrepreneurs what it is they want, because
yeah.
we all have our money, in terms of legacy, right? What do they want in terms of legacy? Because we all come into this with our own money hangups that we, got as kids from our parents
Absolutely.
or
Yep.
have created in our own lives as we've progressed.
Mhm.
And so how do you work with people?
So there's a couple of things. I like to try and build habits. So when I look at it from that perspective, like when we go through a financial plan, the first step is, what is your ideal life today? And then let's figure out what that costs from a money perspective. Now let's go back and figure out what your business has to do that. And then we'll break it down into bite-sized pieces so that it doesn't seem too overwhelming, right? And then automate your pay to yourself, because the number of entrepreneurs I know who own, like, oh, that bill's due, I guess I better pay myself something, as opposed to having a system and an automation of the money coming in and going over, and then having a whole plan of how you're going to deploy that personally. And when it comes to the end game, like, we have to think about that too. So end game, as we started talking about legacy, is a couple of things, right? So it's the money you might leave behind, whether that's in the form of life insurance or assets, or maybe even your business is something you want to transition down to your family. But thinking about it from a legacy active, like, if you're someone who the work you do is solving a problem, transforming lives, then you are already, that's part of your legacy, right? The work you're doing even today. Because when you change somebody and make their life better, then that has a ripple effect in their life. And so that impact is increasing and your legacy is increasing. But if you look at how you're running your business, if you look at your business as an opportunity to make even greater impact, well, what are you doing to make sure that that business will outlive you? Right? Because then that is going to also compound your impact, right? So if you look at, um, you've developed some unique ways of doing things, you've tackled the problem. So let's make intentional and deliberately build out your business in a way that it can continue on after you, whether that is something that you're going to, sell down generations, sell it to your employees or to a third party, right? Like, thinking about all those options. But um, knowing that that's what you're going to do with legacy can be so transformative in terms of how you look at your business. And it also kind of helps it grow up from being your baby, right? It becomes an instrument of change.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also, from a personal perspective, puts the CEO in the place of, I need to be replaceable.
Mm.
Because in all of those scenarios you talked about, employees, a sale, or a passing to family, all of those, really mean that you have to be replaceable. And so how do you start extracting yourself out of all of those things where it's like, well, no one can do this but me?
Yeah, it requires a little bit of being ready with the ego check to some degree. And I think that when we start our businesses, we do have to be the face of our business for the most part, because that's how we're attracting our clients and making our world. But there comes this time when it has to transfer over, that aura has to be able to go to the business as opposed to you personally, right? And so when you think about it from that way, it's just being deliberate about, okay, I'm going to start out here, and then slowly but surely it's going to be less Wendy, more Black Star, if you know what I'm saying. So that's the process that you have to think about. But definitely you start out as the figurehead for the most part, and then you just have to work your way through that. And here's the thing that's kind of contrarian, I think, Julie, is the more you do that, the more freedom you have, right? Now you're dealing with the meaty strategic issues as opposed to the day-to-day detail. And that can be tremendously freeing for a person, in the sense of, now, okay, someone else is going to handle all that. I'm just going to deal with the big thing and help them figure out the strategy they will implement. And, that freedom piece is super duper good, and whether you actually intend to build something that will transition, if you do the work to free yourself, your business will be more valuable and more sellable.
Mhm. And that's where I know I talk a lot with people about the, sprinting pace versus marathon pace. And that's where you really, really settle into the long distance pace, right?
Mhm.
Where you're managing your time, you're managing your stress, you're relying on others to do their jobs and you're holding them accountable for it.
Mhm.
And that's where you really reach this like place within the business of like everybody's doing the right role for where the business is.
Well, and I think that there's a couple ways you can just to measure where you are on that. So the first one would be, uh, can you take a week or two off and not look at your email? Okay. What I see a lot of times, and I said this the other day to a crowd, and you could just see all the heads nodding, and it was, is a vacation just moving your office to somewhere nicer?
For a lot of people, that's exactly what it is. Some of it is, I think, control, but some of it's also just this habit we have that we can't put our devices down.
Yeah. Well, and there are strategies like, have a different phone for the weekend. Go old school on that sucker. Don't even get email on it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you're not put out of office saying, "Hey, I'm away for the weekend. I will deal with this on Monday." And start conditioning and training the people in your work life that you have boundaries and that they are to be respected. I know that when I'm dealing with someone and they're clear with their boundaries, I'm like, "Okay, no problem." Versus, you know what I mean? So, people don't take offense to that. I think we worry about that. "Oh, what do you mean you're not available Saturday at 3 to respond to my email that could wait another week to deal with?"
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I got to a point when I was a leader with the team where I would put one person in charge
Yep.
and direct everybody to that person. And then, say to the person on the last day, if it all hits the fan, text me.
Yes.
And they never would, but it made me feel better. But, that's that was my last
Yeah.
thing that, I needed to let go of, but I couldn't quite.
Yeah, we actually had a special Facebook account for when we vacationed, and because we didn't have it on our names, and we said, "If you need us, post there."
Right.
So that, if we were still looking at Facebook or whatever, we could go and go, "Oh, they need us," versus even checking our phone for anything. So that was good.
Yeah, it's so funny, but it's true. You've got to figure these things out both for your own long-term health and for the health of the business.
Well, and I think if we're dealing with women entrepreneurs too, if you think about it, can you take a real mat leave?
Oh, yes. Actually, in one of my episodes with Erica McKay, we had a long conversation about that because she was about to have her second child.
Yeah. And so if you were to, I think it's a baby step approach. So it might be, first you take a week off and don't check, see what happens. Maybe it's two, and then start stretching that out more and more to just see how people do. Come back, do a post-mortem. What went wrong? What process do I need to explain or have more better documented? How do you need to have a thinking matrix for how to deal with this type of a problem? And how can I teach my corporate values or my company values to you to use as a guideline to make decisions, so that I'm not necessarily always needed? Because if you use my values, you will end up probably at the same decision I would have made.
Right.
Yeah. So it's training, right? So come back postmortem. And I also think that there's another word in there as well that we have to deal with, and that's the guilt word.
Yes.
Because
As women, we're very good at guilt.
ah, excellent at it. So I have to deal with this all the time, even with myself, because I feel like the majority of us were brought up in this industrial economy of, we work 9 to 5, and that's how it works. So when we hire people and they work 9 to 5, if I'm not in the office with them, I have to be okay with that. And that requires me overcoming some societal programming I've had since a childhood, right? So even thinking about that piece, it's also coming to realize that when we are entrepreneurs, we are not rewarded for effort and time. We are rewarded for results only. The universe does not care
How long?
how long we try, how hard we tried. Does not care. And so, it's different. Our employees get rewarded for how hard they tried.
Mm-hmm.
We only get rewarded if it works. So turning that on its head a little bit, effort is tied to the time and your paycheck versus you only get paid when you're rewarded or when you have an effort and something happen versus, yeah. And so it's an interesting mindset shift that you have
Mm-hmm.
to take as an entrepreneur because we're not in an industrial economy when we are the entrepreneur.
How has this work and this sort of coaching piece to what you do helped you grow your own
Mm.
business?
Well, it shows me when I'm on the right track and when I'm on the wrong track for sure. And even if you know what you need to be doing, you still stray at times. So it's really having that ability to recognize when you're off track and being able to kind of reset, have a have a mulligan, if you will. I always think of the Staples button, as a visual of that. Got to start over again. But I think that having the end game in mind has been so helpful for me. So when I started doing training and I have my back end now for helping people with the value of their business, it was fascinating for me because I took the assessment that I have. So I have a 13-minute assessment that will actually tell you what the value of your business. Okay. So I did all of that. And then, of course, I go, this is where I want my value to be in the next 5 years. So now I can go back and re-engineer and go, okay, in order to do that, I need to answer the following questions in a different way. So then that sets my strategic plan in motion in terms of what are the things I can do that will make this business better, more sellable, more valuable, which in turn actually frees me up. So it's kind of an interesting, beautiful place to get to, but it's the
Mm-hmm.
reverse engineering and starting to think big picture like that. So many of us get into it day to day to day, and we're in the trenches. So, and you start making profit and now your business is going well, but well, then what? That becomes the process to start thinking about. That's a really great inflection point to start that process. And it's fascinating too because a lot of people get a little bit bored along the way once the business is functioning very effectively. So that might be a trigger point to say, yeah, it may be time for you to bring in management and go on to something else or to sell and activate that. In particular, I think about so many entrepreneurs have some level of ADHD, which can actually mean that they are even more susceptible than the average entrepreneur to shiny blingy things. So, having the skill set to be able to build a valuable business going, okay, I'm ready for the next thing, you can sell it. So you're actually getting all the value of the time and effort you've put into that business. It's kind of an interesting way to look at it. So, having this training, having this system has really sharpened my focus on being able to know what I need to build in order to maximize the value. I may never execute, and that's okay, but I know that every step I take will increase my cash flow and will increase how I feel about my business in a positive way.
Do you think you built that system because you yourself needed it?
Ooh, maybe. And maybe that was hidden in like all the entrepreneurs I deal with, and we're looking at, kind of starting to do financial planning and we're looking ahead. And I like to do a measurement of net worth as kind of our progress chart. How's your net worth doing? Because it can be in a bunch of different places. So it's a great kind of um, marker. There comes a time when your business becomes your most valuable asset, and yet we have zero idea what it's worth. We have zero idea how to maximize the worth of that. We have no idea what it means, like, you know, when you do sell or transition your business, how much of that's going to end up in your pocket versus, have you structured yourself correctly? Have you employed the right team? You know what I mean? CRA, partner in business and life, every step of the way. So how do you make sure they're happy but not too happy? Um, that type of stuff. So that requires thought, and it usually requires, if you're going to be intentional about it, you need to start at usually 3 to 5 years before you want to execute. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, and it is interesting because it's this place that entrepreneurs end up where they have an asset that is pretty
Mm,
illiquid.
yeah.
There's not a lot of options. You got to sell it in some way to get your money off the table. And, often it is in place of, pensions,
Mhm.
retirement savings at the level that you might have. So, although it seems like a windfall to sell the business and actually extract that money, yeah, the more you lose to taxes, the more, like, all of the things that are important to ensuring that the amount that comes out to you is going to actually be able to fund the retirement that you're going to have and those kinds of things, because it seems like a huge amount of money, but often it isn't as quite as rosy as it seems.
Yeah, you sell for X, but you get Y.
Exactly. You pay all of those people that need to help you, all of those
Mhm.
experts. Pay the tax
Yep.
man, and then, you kind of have, some piece left to work with, which may seem like a lot of money.
Yeah.
But whether it serves your needs or not is a different
Well,
question.
which leads me to my next point. My next point is, when it comes to end game, do you know what you want your life to be like after work? I say that after work, you could have a slow down strategy, you could have whatever, but usually there is a point where it stops. Like it might be 75 for you, it might be 80, whatever it is, it still comes a time sometimes. But where I see a mistake that can be made is not knowing how much you need that pile of money to be to fund that. And so, what I have seen happen is people hold on to their business too long, hustle, 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 not knowing they've already passed that line. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a mindset shift that can happen if you know that you have more than enough money to fund your life for the rest of your life. You're going to show up different. You are going to be different. There's going to be this confidence that probably oozes from you that's different than if you're like, okay, I need to make this so I can make payroll.
Right.
Yeah,
Those are two very, very different places to approach from.
right. And so when I say that, I want people to actually do the work, because here's what I see all the time in the media about retirement. You're going to need X% of your pre-retirement income. Okay. Now, I will tell you that the majority of entrepreneurs, if I ask them exactly how much money they make and how it comes out to them, they don't know. I actually have to get them to give me their tax returns. That's how I figure it out a lot of the times, because some of it's dividends, some of it's salary, maybe it's a bonus. So, how it all adds up and how it's going to work is tough. And knowing that number really does free you up. And it also tells you where you need to get that business to, and how much of that business value do you need to capture to fund that. And then that helps with your reverse engineering. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that it is true. The more information you have, the more choice you have, and the more you realize what levers you can pull
Yes.
on to get to where you want to go.
Well, and again, we'll go back to that anti-hustle. I had a client who had offers on this business, and he kept saying, I'm going to work another year or two so I can get the value up another 100, another 200. And he's already tired, right? And I'm like, but do you need to? But you know what I mean? But he didn't want to do the work to figure out what he needed. It's hard to look at that sometimes. You have to be prepared to be vulnerable with people, and you have to be open and non-judgmental of any decisions you've made in the past, because that's in the past.
Yeah, it really is one of those circumstances where information is power and it gives
Yes.
you the choice to make. Because I think sometimes when you lay it out all on the table, you say, yeah, I'm not incrementally getting where I want to in the next 5 years, so it should end now.
Yeah, that can be tough.
Very tough. But at least with information, you can have the view and make those decisions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, without information, And to get granular, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs aren't necessarily got their accounting in a way that gives them the information to make decisions. And I think that's because when we start out, we go and get a bookkeeper. They go, oh, here's a chart of accounts to track stuff. But it's not necessarily tracking the things you need to track, right? You know, do you know what your true cost of goods sold are? Do you know what your customer acquisition costs are? Do you know those things? And if they're buried in 500 different line items, you're not going to do the work to go find it.
No, it's true. Yeah, having the right people around you. And, sometimes it can be very hard to know whether you do or not. Let me rephrase that. It can
Yeah,
be hard to know if you don't have the right person around you. I
absolutely.
think once you get the right people around you, you do know.
Yeah.
Um, but there can be that zone. And I remember a point in my business where one of our advisors said to me, Julie, with all due respect, your accountant is not doing his job. And it was like someone turned a light bulb on above my head. I had not wanted to think that. And as soon as he said it to me, I was like, you're 100% right. And that led to, a change in accountant, and it led to a very different path at a key point in the business when it made a lot of difference for us to have somebody at the table that was the right person.
It's so interesting. I think I look at accountants in two levels. Like there's a different level in your bookkeeping. That's a different story. But when it comes to our accountants that we work with, I think they're either transactional or strategic. I think when we start out, it's okay if it's transactional. You're smaller, but as soon as you start growing, you need the strategy accountant. And they are not inexpensive, but man, do they make a difference.
A
If
huge
they
difference.
understand a different way of looking at things, they've seen multiple companies do what you do so that they can understand and say, hey, here, I've seen people do X, I've seen them do Y. Here's the pros and cons. Which way do you want to go?
Yeah. No, I think it's really, really important to get those people around you and to, do the things that are right for your business, because we get attached to our relationships too. And it's hard to move on sometimes,
Mm,
even though it may be the right thing. So it's also doing the hard stuff.
it's super hard recognizing that you may have outgrown somebody in your organization and you need a different skill set and a different approach to get to the next level. Because obviously, I'm sure you teach this, what you got you here isn't going to get you there.
Yep. So true. It's so true. And so what's next for you, Wendy, with your business?
So, in light of the kind of way out there, so I have a program where I teach entrepreneurs how to increase the value of their business. I have a whole program where we help them figure out that end number and all the pieces along the way that they need to achieve to get there. And now, what I'm launching at some point soon is I'm going to call it fixed fee advising. And so, right now, when people say, oh, I'm a fee for service advisor, chances are it's a percentage of your assets. And so, where I was getting the cognitive dissonance, Julie, was around, hey, if you have $1 million, you're probably paying about 10 grand a year for fees or more, depending on what you're invested in. And then, you get $2 million. Now it's costing you 20 just for your advisor, not for any of the management of the fees of that stuff. And I'm like, are you getting double the value? And that's where I started having the cognitive dissonance that even though my industry is set up that way, it might not be the best way. And so now what I want to do is say, here's the suite of services and what we promise to do. Here's the price for that. And we don't care how many assets you have.
That is going to shake the ground.
And no one ever likes the idea when I run it by other advisors.
Right. And so there's Wendy the entrepreneur coming to the table right there.
I
Good.
think
Well,
maybe,
I look forward to hearing how that plays out. And you're right, because it's an industry shifter and there will be people who are very opposed to it.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, well.
I know. Again, spoken like an entrepreneur. Good. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today. I really enjoyed it. And I love your intersection between entrepreneur yourself and also advising entrepreneurs about their wealth and their
Mm.
finances and how to get the right people around them. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. It was awesome to be here. Great conversation.
Take care. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please remember to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you won't miss any episodes. Figure 8 isn't just a podcast. It's a way of seeing the big, gorgeous goals of women entrepreneurs coming to life. If you're interested in learning more, you can find my book, Big Gorgeous Goals, on Amazon anywhere you might live. For more about my growth and leadership training programs, visit www.julieellis.ca to see how we might work together. Read my blog or sign up to get your free diagnostic. Are you ready for growth? Once again, that's www.julieellis.ca. When we work together, we all win. See you again soon for another episode of Figure 8.